Friday the 27th of June 2025. Unbelievable. Time is flying. We are just days away from being halfway through 2025. Can you believe it? And let's talk about the Bitcoin situation. So, if you remember at the beginning of 2024, it was last year, the Bitcoin ETFs, and then shortly after the Ethereum ETFs went live. And I told you, for years before those ETFs existed, I told you, beware institutional investor devices like ETFs in the Bitcoin space and the crypto space, because you may think it's good for price go up, but that isn't necessarily good for retail investors who want to get a piece of it. And the whole purpose of Bitcoin is, the original intention and purpose was to be the quote unquote the people's money, right? Well, we know obviously that 95% of Bitcoin is held by whales, wallets with 100 or more, or even 1,000 or more Bitcoins in them. And it's going to be, probably 99% very soon, certainly within a few years, which basically means that a very, very, very small, almost negligible percentage, it is already really negligible, percentage of humanity will ever actually own any Bitcoin of any substantial amount. And the rest will just be all owned by the wealthiest people, organizations, and governments in the world. I mean, they already own it, and they have no intention of selling, and they're among the wealthiest people in the world. So why would organizations in the world and governments in the world, or why would they ever sell any of it if they don't need to? Certainly, while it keeps rising in value over time. And if it becomes the standard and the world currency standard and all that, then they really have no reason to sell any of it. Which then brings about the question, well, when is that really going to happen? Well, if you're interested in price go up, keep in mind, there is literally a supply shock on the way. It's an asset that has very limited supply. Right? 21 million is the max supply cap. And we know that, whatever the estimates are, say 5 million of the Bitcoins are lost. Could be 3, could be 6, could be somewhere in the middle. Just say 5 million, okay? A little bit less than a quarter of all the Bitcoins that can ever be minted or mined are inaccessible. Wallets that have gotten lost or destroyed or otherwise inaccessible. Some owners might have passed away and not given the seed phrases to their heirs, or they may not have left any to any heirs. Things happen. A quarter of all the Bitcoin is not accessible. Think about that. 1 out of every 4. Okay, we're just slightly under a quarter. On top of that, you got, the largest ETF issuers and buyers who have an additional certain number of millions of them. If you just add BlackRock, which has more than 600,000 Bitcoins already, and Strategy, right, Michael Saylor's company, which has another almost 600,000, that's already more than 1.2 million. Plus, if you add up all the other ETF issuers, that's another, more than several 100,000 more. So that's already far more than 1.5 million, right? Last year, I told you they would likely buy anywhere between 500,000 and 1.5 million. When you add them all up, that's exactly what they did. And this year, they kept buying it up. And I told you that by the end of this year, they will probably have bought more than 2 million. And there's not that much left. There's barely any left. Like, they bought up all the OTC coins. Yes, there's still some, but not very much. Yes, there will always be some supply, as long as there's still any supply, some supply from retail and or miners becoming available. as the price reaches new all-time highs, etc., or as miners need to pay for their bills, etc. So they'll be willing to sell some, but usually they'll sell them at a premium because they know they can get it from these large organizations who will just pay anything to buy it all. Because to them, $100,000 Bitcoin or $200,000 Bitcoin or $300,000 Bitcoin is nothing when they expect the price to go to millions. Even $500,000 Bitcoin to them is considered a safe insurance or safe investment because they believe the price will go to millions. And it very well may, right? The probabilities are pretty darn good that it could. I mean, what? It's gone up 14.8 billion%. You think it can't 10x again? Really? Like, seriously, it's gone up 14.8 billion% from zero to the all-time high. And we're only like 4 or 5% below the all-time high right now at like 107,000, right? Like 4% or whatever. So what, you think it can't 10x? Really? You think $100,000 coin can't go to $1 million when there's more demand and as there's no supply? Again, the on-chain analysis, if you look, just strictly look at on-chain analysis, look at wallets that have acquired, only acquired, never sold, never transferred out, never sent to anybody. They've only acquired. Right? The overwhelming majority of the supply at this point is in wallets that have never moved any amount. And the vast majority, like again, 95%, overwhelming majority, practically all of the supply is now held by wallets with 100 or more coins. And again, more than 90% of the total coins are held by wallets with 1,000 or more Bitcoins. Like, do you understand what kind of a supply shock we're talking about here? This is not some little bit of a supply shock. There is an extremely limited asset for which there is still a significant amount of interest and demand that is currently being held by anywhere from 50 to 100 million wallet owners. And 95% of it is owned by wallets with 100 or more. And 90% of it is owned by wallets with 1,000 or more. Most people are lucky to have 0.01 Bitcoin at this point. Like, not a joke. If you have $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, right, or slightly more than 1,000 now, $1,070 worth of Bitcoin, you're actually in the top 1% in a sense of retail holders. Because most people in America, for example, can't afford a $500 emergency bill. Think about that. Most people in America cannot afford a $500 emergency bill. Which means there's no way that they could afford 0.01 Bitcoin, because that's twice as much as they'd have to have for an emergency bill. The supply shock is very real. And I've been telling you all year, expect that by sometime, possibly in the summer, maybe in July, we will see it have a massive impact. Now, what do I mean by massive impact? I mean, you are going to see a crazy rush for people trying to buy it, only to realize they can't get any at the price they want because it's not available. Now, sure, you can still probably go on an exchange in July and maybe even August and September and throughout the rest of the year and keep trading and, probably losing your Bitcoins or you're losing your dollars against Bitcoins because you'll probably lose most of your trades, as most people do, especially if you don't trade with leading information. And if you don't know what you're doing with that leading information, if you're just doing Voodoo TA or whatever, then you're probably going to lose your trades. But even if you're not trading, even if you're just buying and holding, you're going to find very soon that there's not going to be any left to buy. Yes, exchanges still have a whole lot of it. Hey, how are you?
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Hot.
It is. Hey, kids. cool dress. Wow, look at you, champion. You had the party? Very nice. Oh, nice. Congratulations. He's looking like he's trying. I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there.
He keeps dropping it, so it rips.
Champion. See ya.
Bye.
See ya. Have a good one. Kids out here in Israel are finishing school in the coming days. So they're having all kinds of end of year parties and whatever in elementary school and all that other stuff, high schools or whatever. So there is a supply shock coming, like I said, and it is very real. And you're going to see, yes, there's still some coins available on exchanges. Yes, there's still some coins that you can, find and trade or buy somewhere, right, on various DEXs and various centralized exchanges. But overall, the supply is dwindling rapidly. And if you think that Coinbase is just going to sell you the whole stack that they hold, in addition, like on top of what they have in their business that their clients hold, right? Because Coinbase obviously has a stack of coins. Bybit has a stack of coins. Binance has a stack of coins. Each of these exchanges has their own stack in addition to the stack that their customers hold. If you think they're going to sell you their private stacks when they know what's happening and they see that the supply shock is incoming, I mean, you got another thing coming. They are not going to sell those stacks to you. They are not interested in selling you the coins that they hold when they know that each of those coins could be worth millions of dollars someday and maybe more. So good luck getting that off of them unless you have extremely deep pockets and you're willing to pay insane premiums, because they're just not going to sell that to you, at market rates or whatever. They're just not. Why? Because they don't have to. Because they already have all the Bitcoins. That's the asset people want. And the whales and the governments and the financial institutions, like, hedge funds and investment banks, huge HFT firms, you think they're going to sell you their Bitcoins? No. Why do you think they invented ETFs? So they could sell you a paper derivative, which is an IOU for the cash equivalent of the Bitcoin's value at the time that you buy it or sell it. That's all it is. When you buy a Bitcoin ETF, you're not buying a Bitcoin. You're buying a piece of paper that says this piece of paper is backed by the amount of Bitcoin that it represents. So if you buy a Bitcoin, one whole Bitcoin, with a Bitcoin ETF, you own the paper equivalent of an IOU that says we owe you the amount of money that one Bitcoin is worth at the time that you sell it. You bought it at this price, and whatever you sell it at, that is the price that will buy it back from you. Whatever the market price is at that time. That's all that is. And yes, in theory, they're supposed to be all back 1-to-1, and maybe they are right now in the initial, months and years of those ETFs. But that doesn't mean that they'll always be backed 1-to-1. Just like gold isn't backed 1-to-1 by paper. If you think it is, well, again, you got another thing coming. There's no way that all the gold in the world is backed 1-to-1, or all the gold paper, the paper gold, I should say, is backed 1-to-1 by actual physical gold. There's just no way. Everybody knows that. Now they will, gold reserve holders will tell you, no, of course it's backed 1-to-1. Yeah, how do you know? Especially, first of all, they keep mining more gold. Plenty of supply, so they keep issuing more ETFs for gold. They keep issuing more gold certificates. Who knows what the exact amount is? You don't even know what the exact amount of gold is, right? So you don't know. It could be over-backed, doubtful. It could be under-backed, more probable. It could be 1-to-1, highly improbable, right? Because how would you know? Because miners are constantly mining more gold, but they're issuing more gold certificates at a more rapid rate than the amount that's being mined, in all likelihood. How do we know that? Human beings are human beings. Companies are going to do whatever they got to do to make money, and you have no idea that every single ounce of gold that actually exists is 1-to-1 backing up that value on paper. And it would be crazy to think that it is. People just accept that paper gold is worth whatever paper gold is bought and sold for. And you accept that it's not really worth that. I mean, sure, if you have an ounce of gold certificate, you can get an ounce of gold for it. But if there's a run on the gold market, meaning people want to suddenly cash out their gold for some reason because people fear it's going to be worth a lot less soon, good luck trying to get an ounce of gold for an ounce of gold certificate if suddenly every single, or half or more of the people who have gold suddenly try to go out and get their actual gold. Good luck. Probably not going to happen. It'd be like a run on the banks. If half the people of a bank ran to the bank and said, "Give me all my money," the bank would say, "Sorry, we can't help you." Well, why not? It's only half the money. They should have twice as much, right? No. A bank has, if they're lucky, 1% of the money that they say they have. Because for every dollar that you lend them, and when you put your money in your bank account, you're lending them money because they get to use it. For every dollar you lend them, whether you give it to them or whether the Federal Reserve gives it to them, they get to reissue it more than 100 times. I think the average now is like 111 times. It's some insane number. So for every dollar that you put into a bank, they're using it 111 more times. Just say 100, okay, for round numbers. They're reinvesting that money, and they're lending it out 100 more times to other people. I look like Jack Black Steve. I don't know what Jack Black Steve is, but hello. Hi. Anyway, point is, just like there could be a run on gold, just as there would be a run on the dollar, when there is no Bitcoin left, and Bitcoin, you can track how much of it there is still, but not necessarily Bitcoin ETFs, because yes, for now it might be back 1-to-1, but it might not be in the future, right? Rules and regulations can change, and when that happens, things can happen that are funny and or shady and may not necessarily comport with the facts. So yeah, your Bitcoin ETF might be a great cash cow right now, and you might still be able to get one Bitcoin for every Bitcoin ETF you have, like a full Bitcoin ETF, or a fraction of, or an equivalent fraction for whatever fraction you buy. But who knows how long that will last? And when the real Bitcoin runs out, you won't be able to get any more real Bitcoin, because the holders who are holding it forever, they're not going to sell. They'll sell. Okay, maybe they'll sell a slice here, a slice there, to make markets, so that people are buying and selling it, so there's liquidity. But they're not going to sell a lot of it. It's going to be hard to buy. You're going to have a lot to buy any significant amount worth, like that people will perceive as worthwhile. Any amount will be worthwhile, in my opinion, but it's going to be hard to get any amount. And they might have rules on it. They might say, well, now you need $5,000 minimum buy-in to get any. They might say you need $10,000. They might say you need $100,000 buy-in. If it goes up to $10 million a coin, you don't know. They can set rules like that if they want. They're centralized exchanges in an unregulated market. They do whatever they want. And decentralized exchanges, sure, they can still let people buy and sell directly, but there's no guarantee that they also won't put limits of some kind. They're decentralized, and they can do whatever they want. If they're, yes, they're decentralized, so in theory they're open, but even decentralized exchanges can have centralized operators. For example, Bybit has a centralized exchange called Apex, right? Technically, it's a decentralized exchange, but realistically, they control it. So think about that. There is a supply shock coming. I would not be surprised to see the first impacts of it starting in July. We're already really seeing impact, but like the first significant impacts of it coming this next month. I'm not saying it absolutely will. I'm saying there is a decent probability that it will, because of the rate at which these big buyers are buying and holding, and the little that there is left of it. there's not much left. So high demand, low supply, there's only one thing that's going to happen. Supply shock will cause prices to explode at some point in the coming probably months. Probably by the end of the year. Everyone's saying, oh, this is going to be the end of the bull run. But listen, if there's a supply shock this year and people are demanding it and they can't get any, this could be not the end of the quote unquote bull run, which you know what I think about that. There's no such thing as a bull run. There's just buy pressure and sell pressure. We could be seeing the beginning of a massive cycle of buy pressure that will take Bitcoin not to a couple $100,000 or $500,000, but maybe even to multiple millions of dollars. I'm not saying that's a price prediction or anything, but there is a high probability if and when we see a supply shock take effect. And that could easily happen in the coming months. Anyway, that's going to do it for now, folks. I'll talk to you later. Happy trading. Peace.